Thanks everyone for coming. I want to thank Aves Lair for having me. This is really exciting because I think we're all on the precipice of something really special with what we all classify as fourth generation blockchains and kind of move being at the kind of foundation of it all. But I guess we'll jump into sort of that over the next month, Hackathon, and then over the next few days here. And so I'm just about to kind of kick us off and kind of just give an introduction to Aptos for those of you who are, I guess, less familiar with the ecosystem. Maybe this might be more of an echo chamber for people who are more familiar with Aptos, but I think this is just kind of a good way to kick things off here. And so before I kind of jump into things, I guess I'll give a brief introduction so we can level set. So I am Alex Lynn. I am the head of research and investment. I'm on the investment team at Shima Capital. So I guess more briefly on myself, I studied applied math, computer science, and economics in undergrad. I actually got into crypto back in 2013. 2012, 2013. I was buying RuneScape accounts. I was selling them to people around the world. And had some buyers pay me Bitcoin. And that was my first exposure to things. And I remember back in 2014, Dell, so I was an intern, I was a firmware engineer at Dell, and they started accepting Bitcoin. And that's when I was like, oh wow, this is going mainstream, right, in 2014. Little did I know we were very far from that, but thinking back, Dell partnered with Coinbase Commerce, and I'm sure you guys are familiar now, back then to accept Bitcoin for products. So I remember buying Latitude, an XPS computer with Bitcoin, and so that was my first foray into things, but I actually became an engineering product manager in Web2, in ad tech, enterprise SaaS, and then I started my own digital health company before diving into the investor side last year after completing my degree from Cornell, focused on computer engineering and an MBA. So that's just a quick kind of background on myself. I've been at Shima Capital for about 9 months now. And if we kind of dive into what Shima is, oh wow, okay, so things get cut off, we'll navigate as needed. But so Shima Capital, we are an early stage venture fund. Oh, thank you. Generalist, focused on these kind of 5 core areas. So we're chain agnostic, we're vertical agnostic, and stack agnostic. So if you think about kind of, we invest in the application layer side, or level of things, gaming, consumer, DAOs, all the way down to the processing layer, network layer, data layer. And obviously, on number 5, very relevant to kind of what we'll be talking about today. And then the way that I kind of look at things, right, it's very important to look at the network layer as kind of more of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Thinking of layer 1 as our food, water, shelter, right? And you kind of go up the pyramid as you decide what application we're building on the network layer. So these are kind of just core areas that we focus on at Shima Capital. And just, I guess, for the developers out there, to give you more context as to who we are and how we operate as investors, we focus on 4 core areas. So we have an in-house marketing team, we have an in-house talent team. We really focus on business development. We have over 400 LPs, for instance. Their network is our network, and by proxy, our portfolio company's network. And we're happy to intro you to whoever you need to get in touch with. And then lastly, kind of where I fit in structurally is research and technical advisory. So we have a very crypto-native, operator-driven team. As I mentioned, I was a former operator, kind of still an operator at heart, and do a lot of advisory work for our portfolio companies, everything from architecture design to token design, you name it, right? Really focusing on products and ensuring that our portfolio companies are building sustainable businesses. Okay, that's it. I think that's it for the intro. So if we go to the next slide. So I guess my introduction to Aptos, I guess I could have looked at this in a number of different ways. And over the course of the last few weeks, months of doing research on Aptos, it really comes down to 4 or so core areas in which I want to focus on in terms of Aptos itself as an ecosystem. And that's really just the move language, of course, Aptos is into fault tolerance, which is its consensus mechanism. State sync, so generally state synchronization, how Aptos deals with state sync. Block STM. So block STM is kind of their parallel engine, and then kind of a call to action, right? This is the hackathon, and so I kind of want to talk about how I view the ecosystem and what the opportunity is with respect to building on top of Aptos. Okay, cool. So a brief history on Aptos, and like I said, this is something you guys probably know already, but I think this is good to just kind of level set, right? And so if you think about where it all started with the team, so Oshi, Irichi, they used to be at Libra, DM, so the Facebook blockchain, and this is kind of the timeline in which you can kind of see the phases of Libra becoming DM at a very high level, and then effectively it dissipated into a segregated party. But the motivation of Aptos really kind of starts here, and I kind of wanted to highlight this because this is also where Mu as a language originated. So you can see, so this is actually a Facebook post that David Marcus, one of the leaders of the Libra team, he posted on his timeline of him, well, he actually came from, I believe, PayPal, and joined the messenger team at Facebook, or Meta, and then in 2018 was going to pursue this route of building out a blockchain solution, right? The whole idea is connecting billions of users financially through Facebook's blockchain. Next slide. And so, this was kind of the crux of the beginning. You kind of see the headlines highlighting all of this stuff. And so, 2019, kind of more or less, if you guys are familiar in the space, a time where it was kind of like this down cycle. But you can see, Facebook, Telegram, open succeed with Bitcoin fail. I think that was like the first New York Times article that came out with respect to the launch. Next slide. But it was very short-lived. So if you look at 2019, right, the white paper was also released, but then, next slide. It pretty much, later in 2019, it was immediately, I guess it garnered a lot of attention from regulators. And so, quite quickly, you can kind of see from the headline, because it all does, that there's massive amounts of pushback. And then ultimately, over the course of, last 2 years or so, ultimately this shut down, and it no longer is an entity with Facebook Meta, but obviously all the underlying foundations of the project still persist on into Aptos. Well, technically 2 projects, but today we'll focus on Aptos. So, this is just kind of a quick overview of the DM Foundation and what it came to be. A lot of big names here that ultimately did believe in this, but it got shut down. So, okay, cool. So, this is just a screenshot of the website, but I mean, we are here at Aptos, right? The goal is to build a safe, scalable, and upgradable Web3 infrastructure ecosystem. Moshi, CEO, I believe is strategic partnerships at DM, Aves Lair, principal software engineer. They really had this vision to say, hey, we want to bring crypto blockchain to the masses, very similar to what we were trying to achieve at DM or Libra, and now we want to do it with Aptos Labs. And so, this is kind of the underlying thesis and their ethos with how they formed and are thinking about Aptos, and really kind of what came of that, right? As many of you guys know, with headlines, received massive amounts of investor attention, received, speculatively around a $4 billion valuation with around $350 million raised in total. A lot of big names here, and maybe some of you guys are part of this list. And you can see that this is a lot of attention. And it's kind of, and it makes sense, right? The team is extremely strong. And everything that I'm about to talk about today kind of facilitates why the attention is somewhat warranted. Obviously, you can talk about how much or how high the valuation is, but I guess that's a different topic. But for the most part, it's really it really is a testament to kind of what is being built and achieved here. So just kind of rehashing, right? Smart contract language is Move, consensus, Aptos, BFT, Block STM as a parallel execution engine. And that what those things really result in is this, a highly scalable ecosystem, 160,000 transactions per second on a local machine, and the time to finality less than 1 second. Cool. So that kind of brings me to Move. So Move is the program, smart contract programming language of Aptos. And why is this important? So Move was founded, or I guess created by the computer scientist and programming language theorist Sam Blackshear, who's with Wisdom Labs, who's also on the DM Libra team. And Move is really interesting. And the only kind of way, or I guess the way that I want to kind of jump into describing Move is to address two kind of core features of physical assets that is very difficult to be done in a digital sense. Or I guess before I jump into those features, right, so kind of highlighting the issues with smart contract languages as they stand now. So if you think about Solidity, Rust, the languages are not cross-platform. So all the languages pretty much over-index or overfit on the ecosystem that they're building on, in the sense that there's very limited cross-platform infrastructure in terms of how you want to codify certain frameworks, certain libraries, etc. And so if you were to build another chain, for instance, as a developer, another protocol, another project, you effectively have to confine yourself to what Solidity, for instance, on CDM can do. It's either that, or you have to essentially create your own language to kind of facilitate and build on top of it. And so it's very non-conducive, right, in terms of what the utopian vision of Web3 is, which is kind of this very modular ecosystem in which everyone is interconnected and ubiquitous. So in a way, we kind of need a lingua franca type of programming language that facilitates that. Second, smart contract languages aren't safe enough. Obviously, this is a very obvious thing, given the number of exploits that have happened over the years. And so it's a massive security issue. Execution layers aren't fast, right? So the scaling thing. These are all narratives that are very familiar for all of us. And so mature language ecosystems, right, in terms of libraries, when you think about JavaScript, think about one of these core programming languages that we're very familiar with, these packages, right, that you can install, like easy install, right, for JavaScript and Python. That's not quite there yet with existing smart contract languages like Solidity. And so, and that obviously kind of hinders the growth and developer experience. And then lastly, the end user experience, right, as a result of all this. And so the two properties that I want to kind of touch on are scarcity and access control. And so these are really important because it's kind of pretty much fundamental to what blockchain has stood for to this day. So scarcity is really kind of highlighting, right, the supply of assets in the system should be controlled and limited, right? Duplicating existing assets should be prohibited, creating new assets should be a privileged operation. What that means is, if you think about the kind of core infrastructure of existing programming languages, not even smart contract languages, you can effectively have, at the byte level, infinite value creation. So if I set y equals to 1,000,000 and I set x equal to y, and I've effectively duplicated the value of y to x. And so being able to limit that is extremely important, right? Because monetary assets that in and of itself should have this limited supply so that there is value in the asset. And then access control really focuses on the ability for users to access their assets, right? So if you think about going to a bank in physical form, what does that look like in digital form? And obviously we are very, we all understand the wallet situation, and that's kind of very primitive, right, relative to what it could be. And so where does this all kind of come into play, right? It all comes into play at the programming language layer. And so these are kind of the core kind of existing issues, right, with existing smart contract languages. So indirect representation of assets. So this really kind of touches upon the lack of structure and frameworks around actually being able to push through an argument, right, or a function, an asset in and of itself instead of like an integer value. So for instance, right, as it stands now, a lot of references to either a wallet or to an NFT, right, exist in hash tables, right, and they're still using your core structure, your programming structure, such as your integers, right, your bits, your numeric values, right? So there is no actual structure that is fitting for assets. And this is particularly, I guess, important because if you think about like the DAO hack, for instance, that happened in 2016, when you're doing an atomic transfer, for instance, and you're calling between hash functions, right? When you're making the transaction, it's very easy to hack. Insert yourself between the calls of the transactions and between the hash tables. And so that's a perfect example of why existing smart contract languages are not conducive to the security that's needed to managing assets at its core. And when you talk about how is that extensible and not flexible as additional issues. And so one of the design goals with kind of that kind of thinking at its core is that you want to create a language that is a first-class resource. So first-class resource is the way in which you would classify assets natively, flexibility, verifiability, and safety. And under verifiability, you have lack of dynamic dispatch, modularity, and limited mutability. So you can kind of see these are just some ecosystems that I wanted to highlight that are utilizing Move. So Instant Labs, Aptos, Starcoin, Cello, and Chance. Cool. So that kind of wraps up Move, and we're kind of going kind of further into the other features of Aptos. And this is all, as you can see, I'm highlighting, is really addressing the safety and security principles that Aptos really wanted to address. And so with Aptos BFT, so Aptos BFT is Aptos' consensus mechanism, which is built upon a traditional PBFT, so practical Byzantine fault tolerance consensus mechanism called Hotstuff. So Hotstuff is a consensus document that was actually created by VMware back in 2018, and is considered the predecessor of Aptos BFT. And so Hotstuff itself is kind of focuses on 3 improvements to your traditional practical Byzantine fault tolerance structure. And the first thing is a clear system of communication. And so when we think about practical Byzantine fault tolerance, or PBFT, as I'll now refer to, you have a leader node. But traditionally, when the network is deciding on consensus, the nodes not only communicate with the leader node, they also communicate with themselves. And so with Hotstuff, the whole idea is how do we optimize or I guess reduce the cost of messaging and within the network. And so what that results in is each node in the network only communicates with the leader node. And so all the leader node needs to do is reach something called a quorum of certificates. So the quorum of certificate is n minus f, where n represents the total number of nodes in the network, and then f is the total number of malicious nodes before the network becomes, I guess, taken over by 51% attack, whatever. And so n minus f is what's called the quorum certificate, in which the leader node then says, okay, we have reached consensus from a majority perspective, and then the leader node then broadcasts the results. So just at its core function, right, the removal of nodes having to communicate with each other to decide that they are voting, for instance, saves an incredible amount of time and cost to the network. The second is Pacemaker. So Pacemaker is an improved process to selecting your leader node. So PBFT, traditionally, you do not change your leader node after every round of settling and reaching consensus. And there are a number of flaws to that, right? So for instance, if the leader node decides to become malicious or if it gets hacked, there's always the need for your leader node to change. And so what happens here with Pacemaker is that they've created a way to smoothly integrate the changing of the leader node without it being too costly, so that you mitigate against any type of malicious activity by the leader. And then lastly is pipelining. So pipelining is to put it in simple terms, is to really leveraging parallel processing by the leader node. So instead of having to just decide on consensus for one round of transactions, you can do it across multiple. So that's a good kind of visual to kind of highlight the communication between nodes when it's deciding, when it's committing, and when it's deciding it and broadcasting it, what's happening, right? Because you can do it in parallel across multiple rounds of transactions. And so now we come to Aptos BFT, because now Aptos built upon what HotStuff has done. First thing is pretty obvious, so permissionless HotStuff, or I guess Aptos BFT in and of itself versus Diem is permissionless, right? So in a permission blockchain, which was Diem, Facebook or Meta would decide the number of validator nodes that they would have. They would select the validators, very similar to Binance selecting BNB chain. Validators. I think there's still 21 validators on BNB chain, and so kind of the core fundamental difference is that Aptos BFT, there can be an unlimited number of validators, and in which the network will derive its consensus. And I believe the last step it had about 20,000 plus validators within the ecosystem, which is already an incredible number. The second is key rotation, and so this kind of addresses the access control that I mentioned with kind of what Move was trying to solve for. And so key rotation is the ability for any validator or user, right, so wallet, to rotate its private keys, which is particularly useful for the access control thing that I mentioned with maintaining security and safety. And the next two are kind of building on top of what HotStuff did. So Pacemaker, as I mentioned, with selecting the leader. And so current leader has successfully broadcasted the block, and then once that is done, then you rotate through, right? So you rotate to a new leader. How that's done is through something called VRF, so verifiably random function, and this is done so that no one can manipulate the way in which a leader is selected, and the same leader can be selected 2 times in a row. And then lastly, the few messages is really to, as I mentioned, the nodes within the network only communicate with the leader node and not with each other. So I just want to highlight, because I know that was a lot with Aptos BFT, so just kind of want to summarize effectively how it kind of works at a transaction round. And so, a leader node suggests that the block is going to be entering, and so the rest of the validators vote on it, and so they only communicate with the leader node. And once consensus is reached, the block is finalized, then it's pretty much automatic, right? So that's why, as you remember earlier on, the time to finality is less than 1 second, whereas a lot of the time to finality in a deterministic sense, not even probabilistic, is much higher because of the whole leader node communication in the network. And then also number 5, right? So the ability for a leader node to parallel process transactions through pipelining technique and scale it up. Are we good on time? Good. Good for now. Yeah. Good for now. Okay. So state, and I can kind of read through this and happy to chat with you if you guys have questions or take them now. But state sync is kind of the next core innovation that Aptos has kind of brought forth. And so here you can kind of see the kind of typical view of a blockchain ecosystem, this one being Aptos. And so state sync isn't really talked about much. Everyone talks about security, decentralization, and consensus, and scale. But state sync kind of is involved with all of those levels, right? So what it is a protocol to disseminate, verify, and persist blockchain data. This data originates from validators, right? So in the kind of middle circle, you can see the validators, or the nodes, right? Communicating with leader nodes, that kind of established consensus. This information needs to be broadcasted or synced to the rest of the ecosystem. Why? Because the rest of the ecosystem consists of other protocols, other wallets, right? So your wallet is considered a light client because the wallet has to be able to see, what transactions are being conducted on the blockchain, so that if you were to make a swap for your wallet, or if you were to make a transaction, then you can probably enter the transaction at the right time. And so state sync is really this protocol to ensure that there is synchronization, as the name suggests, across the ecosystem. And I kind of touched on this, I guess, just with that, but really to put it into kind of four core areas. So the time of finality, right? Because if state sync is slow, and then I guess in order for you to broadcast or sync to a light client, and the light client needs to make the transaction, and if there's any delay in that, then there becomes this artificial inflation of time of finality, because you're now waiting on the data coming back from the light client, or vice versa, across the entire ecosystem. And right, if you think about it at scale, or in practice, these transactions are happening at every second. Data correctness, and so obviously you want to ensure that the data is aligned across all of these different nodes, clients, and validators. And so what happens is if you aren't syncing properly, it's very easy to attack. And so it's ensuring that or state syncing is ensuring that the data is correct, so that it kind of mitigates against those things. And then obviously this impacts decentralization, right? Because if you have a limited number of nodes, because your state sync is not optimized, right? Because you only want to have a limited number of nodes or clients to ensure your ecosystem is running efficiently. You are sacrificing decentralization for that. And then the relationship with consensus, right, is that if validators either stop working and they have to catch up with consensus, and if state sync is slow, then those validators effectively can never catch up. And so what's being done? So Aptos really decided to say, yeah, there are a lot of issues in which we can kind of bridge the gap with state sync. And so so I'll cover these kind of at a very high level, but the whole idea is how do we optimize the synchronization of data. And the way that they're doing this is through a different number of methods. So everything from state delta syncing, right? So being able to let a validator or a client access the delta between synced information and leveraging that to update itself, all the way through to data prefetching, data caching, so storing things in memory, storage pruning, peer monitoring, computation, et cetera, et cetera. And what happens is you get massive amounts of scale increase or performance increases. And so you can see just through addressing kind of utilizing those kind of 5 or so, or excuse me, 7. How are they doing this, right? So these kind of 5 core areas: concurrency control, multi-version data structure, validation, collaborative schedule, and dynamic dependency estimation are all kind of key areas or functions of STM, which is software transaction memory. But then when you put it in blockchain form, it actually works out very, very well. And how well, right? It is quite performant in terms of the number of threads. So by focusing, and I know I'm just touching on the surface level of block STM, but the results kind of speak for itself in terms of the number of threads that are being used and the TPS achieved by utilizing more accounts, more performant the becomes, right? Because it's parallel processing all of those things. And so the key takeaways from a block STM perspective is that you you have effective speed up of the smart contract parallel processing. You really enable repeatable execution, which is really, really important because not only does that maintain high levels of security and safety, but you're able to, it's more deterministic and less probabilistic when it comes to the consensus and how you validate and settle transactions. And you find practical blockchain use cases for SCM. So as I mentioned, SCM was more of a conceptual idea from a multitude of different academics, actually, and SCM was actually very difficult to apply to existing distributed computation different systems beyond Web3. So in Web2, it just didn't really work out very well. But in Web3, it's very effective. And so now Block SCM has a good use case for it, committing at both per block, benefiting clients independently, and then working with existing blockchain requiring adoption of other validators. And so I wanted to, so I guess I just wanted to rehash kind of the four core innovative areas that Aptos is really building upon to serve as an introduction to the ecosystem. Everything from Move, which serves as the underlying foundations of the smart contract language, to the three very core technical innovations from an architecture perspective: Aptos, BFT, Stacy, and Block SCM. So what does this mean for builders, you guys, and audience listening online with respect to what you could be building as part of this hackathon? Is that if we look at this this image, this is actually Chris Dixon from Andreessen put this together. This is really to highlight the product cycles that exist between industries, or I guess markets, right? So you can kind of see, might be a little small, but at the very bottom, you see the different eras that exist in terms of computation, from PC, internet, mobile, and now essentially Web3. There's very little correlation with financial cycles, which is what you see at the top. Correlation in the sense that the NASDAQ index is what we're going to try to use to represent the financial cycle. You can kind of see it's kind of everywhere. But the product cycles, you can see the businesses that have been built over time that you guys are all familiar with has persisted despite the market being down, despite the market being up. So what this really is trying to highlight is that we are in this next era, right, of Web3 development, building applications for the consumer. What Aptos has done and will continue to do is be an infrastructure layer. And what is kind of ensured, there might be middleware projects out there, there might be projects from an infrastructure perspective building on top of Aptos, but really there's also an opportunity to really talk about the whole how do we bring ancient adoption to crypto. Well, with the infrastructure, given all the features that I mentioned, available to builders and developers, and increasingly will increasingly be conducive for building, this is a call to action for builders to really focus on the next wave of consumer application protocols. And so you can kind of see a highlight of the Aptos ecosystem. It's already rife with amazing projects. We're very excited at Human Capital to kind of see what's coming next. Everything from your typical Web3 native applications, from decentralized exchanges to lending protocols to NFT marketplaces, to, as I mentioned, the infrastructure layer, in which you're kind of being the bridge to a lot of these from an Oracle perspective, smart contract automation, right? So there's an incredible number of projects already being built. And really, this is, I guess, from a hackathon perspective, an invitation for more to enter the ecosystem. So I don't really have a way to close this off, but I guess that wraps up my introduction to Aptos and Aptos ecosystem. I really wanted to highlight four core innovative areas. And if you guys have any questions, or if you guys are looking for investors to back on your project, Aves Lair, thanks again for hosting, and we are Human Capital, looking to support great founders on their journey to building on Aptos.
You want to give them a Q&A for you if you want?
Yeah, I can take some questions. Take some questions. All right.
5 minutes. We want you dead.
Just dumped a lot of information. Everyone, yes.
I can say a point. It's not a question, but you were talking about It's really important for it to move. And I feel like the biggest thing is, I don't know if you guys read NFTs, but like if you heard of Solidity, which is Ethereum's language, your NFT is not stored in your wallet. It's stored like in a smart contract, right? So you could like imagine like in a smart contract, you have like your NFT, like a token ID, and basically like every time that like let's say OpenSea is like what NFTs do you have, just like checking the smart contract. So imagine like this can stop that whole step because your NFT is like directly in your wallet. It's not just stored in smart contracts. That's just
Exactly. So the whole idea of the asset, right? Scarcity. An NFT is also another asset. People always think so much about the fiscal asset, right? Monetary asset of dollars or euros or pounds or so on and so forth. But an NFT is an asset. Information is an asset. And so if you can name assets natively at the bytecode level, integrating into applications, passing through arguments, right, and reference, then it becomes super powerful and safe and secure, right? So a lot of what we see now with exploits could effectively be eradicated very soon. Thanks for having me.
Question. Yeah, I was curious, what do you think is the most important sort of success criteria for Aptos going forward? Like what should be the focus now versus maybe a year or two?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So I guess for people who have been here online, the question was, what is the most important criteria for Aptos to really focus on in terms of ensuring their success? I mean, just from my perspective, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the importance of marketing and BD, which I think Aptos is doing really well. I say this because this isn't controversial by any means, but it definitely will affect a lot of devs, particularly out there, right? You may be the best dev in the world, you might build the best tech, but that, like, you will not always consider the users just by that, right? So, something that Solana did back in 2020, they marketed themselves speculative in terms of how accurate it actually was at that point in time, with whether they achieved it, at least from the data that I've seen. They marketed themselves to hit 700,000 plus TPS. It was on their website in 2020. And Solana, and from a marketing perspective, and that as an investor, that's amazing, right? It's like, okay, like let's invest in this project. They're about to achieve that at that level of scale. And have they ever gotten there? We don't know. But that's an example of really good marketing, really good BD. The foundation, Solana Foundation has always done a really good job of really improving developer experience. And obviously you've heard of all the Solana hackathons around the world. And so I think that's absolutely great, right? Especially when we're first getting started as a new fourth generation layer of blockchains, layer 1 blockchain. Aptos very clearly has incredible tech, but can they sustain that? Can they attract the developers to build on their ecosystem? That all depends on the BD, the marketing, and their ability to communicate their value. Not everyone's going to understand what I just said. So it's like, how do you simplify it for people? How do you just really focus on that? And I think that will for sure continue to succeed.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So it's very interesting that you listed security as one of the top properties of this new language. Just curious, because a lot of other blockchains, they have the authentication. They claim that you need to do something that you don't have to really authenticate items. It looks like that's something that this language now like focusing on. But also you mentioned that it also has like the operation side is like a privilege operation, which means it looks like there's a governance upon that, but you didn't mention the governance part, or who's implemented this, and then it comes with the risk control and other stuff as well. Maybe there's other things that can still be built on. Governance on top of that.
Yeah, and so I didn't touch thanks for calling that out. And I think just as a disclaimer, maybe I should start with that, is that I took a very technical approach to thinking about some kind of what I think is a good introduction to Aptos, the ecosystem, and kind of the value add. A lot of the additional very important things such as governance, token design, which the team hasn't released yet, are all very crucial to ensuring that the ecosystem remains decentralized and remains within kind of Web3 ethos. And yeah, it's also an opportunity, right? So I don't really know that many DAOs that are really focused on building on Aptos and how it relates to governance of the actual underlying ecosystem. And so those are all things that continue to mature as the ecosystem itself matures.
I just want to say one quick note. Like a lot of people are misled by TPS. But I just want you guys to know, like a lot of ecosystems have different TPS. For example, like you might look at like an ecosystem like Solana. Right now, if you look on Magic Bean, the biggest NFT ecosystem, it'll say 2,500 TPS. That doesn't necessarily mean that's for all transactions, right? Some transactions are only able to, for example, like maybe only be doing like 20, 30 TPS. Like if you look at something like there, it might say 10,000 TPS, but because it's like, because like a lot of ecosystems are going to say high TPS, but like if you see Solidity, they'll all be bottlenecked at 15. So like they can't really do 15, like because anything that's like a more complex operation will be like limited to like 15 TPS. So just remember like, and obviously like this is different because I'm pretty sure Aptos, all transactions have the same like impact TPS wise, but yeah, sometimes ecosystems can have different transactions require different TPS, and 10,000 might just be on like me and you like validating the transaction that I sent you money, but it doesn't necessarily mean like a token swap or NFT swap can be all be done at that. But I just want to say just don't get misled by that. But Aptos, they I think it's just the same. Because it's task force, so it should be like the same TPS for every transaction. But I'm not 100% sure that. There's one to see.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I also want to address that TPS is not, it's always a focus, but it's never the true indicator necessarily. I think in a lot of ways, right, let's just say you could hit 5.5 TPS, but in reality, a lot of these tests are done on local machine. And so what happens when you involve latency, which is required or a factor in all blockchains once you go mainnet. And so, and Aptos is actually addressing latency head on, right? So they're doing some off-the-shelf compression mechanisms to address latency. But like that's really important because I think all networks are going to be capped, regardless of how good their consensus is, how good their parallel execution is, if latency itself from a network perspective, internet network perspective, and connectivity itself has issues. Right? So that's another thing to consider on top of
Yes, a lot of layer 1 chain have a foundation or have funding support for development project. I'm just wondering for Aptos, do you have similar sort of funding support for the development project?
Yeah, so they have a grant program. I'm also not on Aptos, seems like I guess I don't know really what their ecosystem fund might look like if they're going to have one. But we invest in projects, so we support founders who are willing to build on Aptos. But yeah, in terms of the Aptos ecosystem itself, I'm sure they are thinking through, I guess a fund, but they do offer grants.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. All right,